children. And it's caught on my kippa. There we go. This is the... Oops, the camera has moved. This is our cattle plague mask for the Seder. It's one of those fun things that really helps the children get through the Seder. And also the adults too, when we wear them when we're not supposed to. So, how are you all doing? Thought that'd be a different way to start the video. As you can see, we also have our giant matzo ball. I actually just blew this up and I feel like now my lungs are all gebrots. In addition to the matzo ball itself. We also, I don't know where the little man went, but we used to have one of these things where it shot out matzo balls. He was a little matzo man. And I think the kid might have lost him under the couch or something. So what's up, guys? We are finishing up our Passover crash course. And today we're going to be talking about the Seder night, the Seder itself, the foods, the drinks, the times. So, as I said that I wanted to do, at least on Facebook, I have brought some real live matzah. It is 100% real, 100% live, 100% matzah. So, during our video today, Ras Hashem, we are going to be cracking it up, hopefully with some good jokes, but also cracking some matzahs to show us exactly what we need to be doing. So, we're finally here. It's the Seder night. All of our cleaning, all of our anxiety has finally come down to this, which is ironic because this is often one of the most stressful things for people, especially people who are new to the Seder. So I'm hoping that tonight we're going to demystify a lot of things. We are going to easily and clearly explain them, and hopefully by the end of this Ras Hashem, we're going to understand the topic a whole lot better. So, let's get into the Seder plate ingredients. The first ingredient that we're going to be talking about is the karpas, which is the vegetable. This is the original VeggieTale. So what is the proper vegetable to be using for karpas? So we know that on the Seder plate, traditionally there are 5 or 6 ingredients, elements. There are 5 or 6 different things, and we'll get into why there are 5 or 6 and why it's not exactly standard. And karpas is the first one. It is the first one that we meet during the Seder, and it is the first one that we're going to be meeting today. Fortunately, I don't have any real live props with me. But I do have the real live matzah. It even says real live on the box, but you'll have to trust me. So, I was thinking this is actually from last year, as you can see. Can we see? It says Passover 2021. I was going to say, hey, you see all that Hebrew right there? Oh, of course you can't, because it's backwards again. Well, it says real live matzah. Anyway, so let's get into our first ingredient for the Seder plate, which is karpas. Now, what is karpas? Karpas is the vegetable, like I said. Now, when I call it a VeggieTale, you're going to remember, because hopefully all of you are familiar with that. And if not, then that's okay. But like I said, the karpas is the vegetable, and traditionally we're going to be using one of a few different vegetables. And for Ashkenazim and Sephardim, they're going to be more or less the same. Now, usually Ashkenazim are a little bit more restrictive. However, as we'll see, the Sephardim actually beat the Ashkenazim in terms of being restrictive on certain things. But then you guys have us beat when it comes to other things. So maybe we'll trade. So for Ashkenazim, according to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or the Kitzur Shulchan Orech, But let's say it like that, because this is how good Ashkenazim say it. According to the Kitzer Shulchan Orech, the radish is the best. Now, when is the last time that you've seen a radish at the Seder? Probably never, because it's not very common. And although it's considered the best, nobody really uses it. What we do use instead are celery leaves, which are considered pretty good. They're considered the second best. You win the race with celery, you're getting a silver medal. Parsley is also okay as well. It's not the best, it's not ideal, but you're still getting that bronze medal, and you're still winning the Karpus VeggieTales Seder race. Ashkenazim will also use boiled potatoes. Those are also fine. Raw onions, which don't sound too appetizing, but I guess we are remembering our affliction, aren't we? Now, for our friends, the Sephardim, they will get Facebook updates. They will use celery leaves and parsley. Now, this doesn't mean that they won't use any of these other things, but from what I found, these are the more common ones. Now, as some of you will know, we then take this karpas and we dip it. What are we dipping it in? Well, we're playing LeBron James, and we're gonna dunk it straight into the salt water, which for the holiday we're going to want to prepare this salt water beforehand. If you can't, if you forget, if things come up, we are allowed to make it on the Yom Tov itself, but we have to make it in a certain way. So when we're making instant coffee, when we're making hot chocolate, when we're making salt water for a Seder, by chance, if you happen to find yourself in a Seder and you need some salt water, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to first fill up the cup, the bowl, whatever we're using, and then we're going to sprinkle on and we're going to salt coat the water. So we add the water, then we add the salt. We add the water, then if we're making coffee, then we're going to pour on that instant coffee. We're going to add the water first, and then we're going to add the hot chocolate mix. Right? Whenever it comes to Shabbat or a holiday, we're always going to be adding the water first, and then usually it comes in a packet or the jar. So we're going to sprinkle in the good stuff after. Water first, then good stuff. Water first, then for the Seder, then the salt. Remember that. Now, this is actually something that I just learned this year that I did not know previously. That Sephardim will also use vinegar. Okay, that might taste good depending on what you're using for the karpas. Some will even use lemon juice or lime juice. And I thought, you know what, that could actually taste kind of good. Hopefully not too good. We don't want to stay in slavery. But we do want to sweeten the judgments. We do want to make slavery a little bit better. More tolerable, that is. So we'll take our karpas and we'll dip it in whatever we're using. Now, like I said, Ashkenazim will use salt water. Most Sephardim will also use salt water, or some will also use vinegar. It's also okay to use the juice. I'm going to put our karpas to the side there. And we're going to get into our next element, which is the maror. Now, you will be sore to hear about the maror, because the maror is the bitter herbs. The bitter herbs, yes, the bitter herbs, I'm sorry to inform you. Herb is feeling very bitter at the moment. Now, who is Herb? Herb is the romaine lettuce. Now, this is actually the best kind of quote-unquote bitter herb to be using. Now, some people will be saying, well, romaine lettuce isn't exactly bitter. And I say, touche, my friend. But the bitter part of the romaine lettuce is actually going to be the very base of it. It's going to be the part that gets rusty. If you all are familiar with lettuce, the base of that can start getting these red-brown streaks on the bottom. and that's going to be the bitter part of the bitter herb. Now, the entire leaf does qualify as maror, and uh, romaine lettuce is the best. However, as I'm sure that many of you know, horseradish is also quite common. Now, interestingly enough, it's actually not the best. It's not the ideal thing to be using. The ideal thing is the romaine lettuce, and both Ashkenazim and Sephardim will both be using this. Um, but Ashkenazim, you'll see it also use horseradish. There is some debate as to whether that actually qualifies as legitimate maror, um, but for those who do accept it, they will use that. Now, something that I'll do actually is I'll take my romaine lettuce leaf and I'll put some horseradish on it just to spice it up a little bit. Now, a third option, if you don't like those, are endives. Now, Sephardim will use all of these except horseradish. Remember, they don't use horseradish. They will use romaine lettuce leaves. They will use endives, like the Ashkenazim. They will also use, and unfortunately, I don't know what this is. Maybe I've seen it before, maybe I haven't. It's escarole or escarole, something like that. My excuse for not knowing is that I've been feeling under the weather lately. I should have looked that up. But if you guys happen to know what that is, by all means, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Teach me something. Now, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the chazaris, or the chazaret. This is going to be the same as the maror. Now, for Ashkenazim, we will be using really whatever we want. If we used the romaine lettuce for the maror, we're also going to be using this for the chazeres. If we used horseradish, we're just going to copy and paste. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Now, Sephardim, they prefer their variety. And whatever they use for the maror, they're not going to be using for the chatzeres. However, there are some, excuse me, they will be using the same thing as the chazeres, and the maror will be the same, but they'll just pick a different option. So perhaps for the first one, they'll be using romaine lettuce, and for the second one, they'll be using endives. Now, for the charoises, or charosets, this is the mortar that we are making to remind us of the mortar that we were making as slaves in Egypt. Now, for Ashkenazim, we will be using figs, dates, pomegranates, apples. These are basically all symbols of Am Yisrael, the Jewish people. And so, just as we were forced to make mortar in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, it's almost like we're taking this symbol of Israel, and it was crushed down and made into the very mortar of the mortar that we were using, symbolically anyway. Now, Sephardim will also be using many of the same fruits, but they'll use slightly different ingredients because, in that part of the world where they live, they just have different ingredients. And they use honey, wine, nuts, fruit, and spices. It actually sounds quite tasty, I have to say. And I should have mentioned that Ashkenazim will also use nuts, anything from almonds to walnuts. I was going to say this spices up the charoises, but it's the roll of spice. Additionally, for both, we are going to be adding wine to the mix. Now, if your charoises is not made beforehand, then if we did not add the wine, usually we're adding wine. If we didn't add the wine before the Yom Tov began, then here's what we're going to do. Pour a little bit on our plate and then throw the charosis mix on top. That way we get the wine into the mixture. And if we're not doing that on the Yom Tov, if we are prepared, and we're going to be prepared, then we're going to add a little bit of wine into the mix so that it is ready for the Yom Tov. Now, now my screen moved. Let's see. Also, I did forget to mention that many Ashkenazim will mix in cinnamon or ginger depending on the recipe that we use. In part because these substances will leave little hairs, little strands. And for anybody who's ever eaten cinnamon applesauce, for example, will find that there's the little specks and the little strands of like cinnamon hair in the applesauce. These little hairs are actually symbolic of the hay and the straw that we used while making the bricks in Egypt. And so even very tiny, subtle things like this are excellent reminders for us. Additionally, I don't think that I mentioned this, but the wine, or some Sephardim will also use vinegar. The wine or vinegar symbolizes the blood that was shed of Jewish slaves in Egypt. So this whole mixture is really reminding us of not just the bitterness of slavery, because this is actually something that the bitter herbs do for us, but it's reminding us in very tangible ways what the slavery was like, not necessarily by the flavor, but by the texture. It's the texture that we're really after. So I guess make make it so that the texture itself is reminding us of slavery. Again, it can be tasty because we're not concerned so much about the flavor for this, for the texture. Am I beating a dead horse? Okay. Now, the last two things are the shank bone, the zerah, and also the roasted or boiled egg, the betza. Now, for these, we use these because the sages ordained that we should use two cooked foods in the Seder. And the broken shank bone of the lamb reminds us of the actual Pesach, the Korban Pesach that was sacrificed in the Beis Mikdash, in the temple itself. And the egg, interestingly enough, actually reminds us of the temple, because just as the temple had three parts, it had the Holy of Holies, it had the sanctuary around it, and then outside of that, we had the courtyard. We also find that there are three eggs. There are three parts to an egg. There's the yolk, there's the white, and there's the shell. So it reminds us of the temple. Now, why are we remembering the temple? And why are we roasting the egg? Well, the reason being that we can also boil it, but it's customary to roast the egg. So why are we doing this? Well, we remember that the temple was burned, and in commemoration of the temple, we are roasting the egg just as the temple itself was roasted, just as it was burned by the Romans. Is this feeling like a crash course? Is this too much? Hopefully not. So how much are we going to eat? Okay. Now, for those of you who want, I do have a document. I do have diagrams of measurements, because some of this very well may get confusing. Now, for the measurements, there are often multiple opinions on how much we have to eat or drink. And so I will be giving multiple opinions so that you can decide what you are going to use. I can give you my opinion on what to do, but ultimately, this is up to you. Now, there are two measurements. One is a kazayit, or kazayis, and another one is called the revi'it, or the revi'is. Now, the kazayis is primarily for foods, and the revi'is is for drinks. So, the kazayis, according to the Rambam, is 0.64 fluid ounces. So think of it as 2/3 fluid ounce. According to Rav Chaim Nae, his interpretation of the Tosafos, he says that it is actually 0.91 ounces, so almost 1 whole ounce. Now, according to the Chazon Ish, his interpretation of the measurements given by Tosafos is 1.61, so roughly 1.5 fluid ounces. For simplicity's sake, let's just think of a kazayas as 1 ounce, right? Keep it easy. Now, these measurements that I just gave you, you are welcome to take whatever you are comfortable with and whatever you would like to do. It is a little bit trickier than just picking one, but for all intents and purposes, I think that will suit most people watching this video. Now for Revi'it, or Revi'as, this is for the liquid measurement. It's for how much of the wine or the grape juice to drink, because as we know, we drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice during the Seder. The majority opinion says about 3 fluid ounces. According to the Chazon Ish, he says 5 fluid ounces. Now these are not exact measurements. That are going to be about 1/100th off, but for simplicity's sake, it's about 3 and about 5. I think the exact measurement is 2.92, something like that. And for the Chazon Ish, it's, I think, 5.07, if you're looking for exact numbers. And these are fluid ounces. So again, for simplicity's sake, for solid food measurements, we're talking about the kazayas. We are talking about 1 ounce. It is actually 1 fluid ounce. So what we're talking about is, if you mash it up or you crumple it up, it's going to be 1 ounce. Technically, we would be using fluid ounces because it's not one solid thing. The important thing is because for some of these substances, they have a lot of air in them. Like, for example, matzah. And so we want to crush these down and get the proper measurement, which again is about 1 ounce. For the revi'it, we're talking about 3 ounces. So kazayas, revi'it, kazayas, revi'it, 1 kazayas, 3 fluid ounces for revi'it. Okay. And again, there are other measurements, but keep these in mind as we're going through these. Remember, kazayas, 1 ounce, revi'it, 3 ounces. This will give you a basic idea and a picture in our minds about what we are talking about and roughly how much we're talking about. So, for example, let's go back to the karpas, which we reviewed it. You guys remember? It is the veggie. So, for the vegetable, the veggie tail, how much are we going to be eating of the vegetable? Do we just have to lick it, or do we have to eat a whole feast of karpas? The answer is no to both of those. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be eating less than 1 kazayas of karpas. The reasons are complicated, but essentially what it comes down to is that if we eat more than 1 kazayas, we have to say a bracha. If we eat less than a kazayas, we do not have to say a bracha. So in order to avoid having to say a bracha, it's best to eat less than 1 kazayas. Remember, 1 kazayas equals 1 fluid ounce. This is according to many important authorities such as the Rashba, the Rosh, the Maharil, and the Shulchan Aruch. Now, if you are feeling especially zealous, or especially hungry, or especially whatever else we might be feeling, it is permitted to eat more than 1 kazayas. This is according to the Bach, the Vilna Gaon, Chazon Ish, and Rav Yosef Soloveitchik. So, for those who want to eat 1 kazayas or less. Excuse me. For those who want to eat less than 1 ounce, right? Less than a kazayas, they have those on whom they can rely. For those who want to eat 1 kazayas or more, they have the authorities on which they can rely. Now, I will say it is better to eat less than 1 kazayas. However, you are permitted to eat more. Now remember, we are going to be taking this karpas, and we're going to be, let me get my real live karpas. We're going to be dipping it into our salt water, or vinegar, or lemon or lime juice. Sprite does not count, I have to say. It does not count for an alternative to salt water and vinegar. It's actually funny. As I was putting this class together, I was thinking, wait, if we can use a potato for the karpas, and many Sephardim use vinegar, does that mean that we can use fries and ketchup? Maybe. I don't know. Don't do that. It is a joke, but I really was wondering then. I thought, put 2 and 2 together. Okay. So, for the maror, remember, you'll be feeling sore after you eat the maror. Why? Because it is the bitter herbs. Yeah, bitter herbs. For these bitter herbs, typically what we are going to be using is the romaine lettuce, and this really is the ideal. Now, for those of you like myself, like my kids, we like horseradish. It's also traditional. So, how are we going to incorporate horseradish if it's not the best thing? Well, what we can do is we can take some leaf, some lettuce leaf, and put some horseradish on top. There. It's not cheating. We're actually fulfilling it twice, and good for you. This is actually something that I enjoy doing. So, how much of this lettuce leaf, and I will not joke about leaving us alone because puns are terrible. How much are we going to be eating of this lettuce leaf? Well, this very scientific measurement. A small leaf. For those of you who are asking, what is a small leaf? Well, it's smaller than a medium-sized leaf, of course, which is actually the ideal thing, a medium-sized leaf. The small leaf is suggested by the Chazon Ish and Rav Auerbach, Shlomo Auerbach. But a medium-sized leaf is actually recommended by the Mishnah Berurah. So it is really the ideal. But if you just can't stomach a medium-sized leaf, you can go with a small leaf, and that is okay. You can leave the medium piece alone. All right. Now for the chazeres, with the chazeret, the other bitter herbs. Now, why do we have other bitter herbs? That's a good question. I'm glad I asked. So we're using other bitter herbs for 2 reasons. One, we don't have to use other bitter herbs. It's actually just what some people choose to do. It's what many people choose to do, but it is optional. One of the reasons why we would be using it is that we have the original bitter herbs. We have the maror that we're going to be using to fulfill the mitzvah of eating maror. Remember, this is our little leaf and our medium leaf. The chazeres, the other bitter herb, remember Ashkenazim will be using the same substance. We'll be using the romaine lettuce leaf or the horseradish or both if you're awesome. And Sephardim will be using another ingredient from that same list that we went over previously. But why do we have 2 on our Seder plate? The reason being is because at not quite the end, about 3/4 of the way through, we will be eating the korech. The korech is the Hillel sandwich, as it's called, which we will be getting to in just a minute. it's the sandwich. And so we want to have bitter herbs on our sandwich. It is actually an important halachic question. And while we won't be getting into that particular debate, let's just remember that it's good to have both. And it's good to have it on our sandwich, which we will be getting to in just a minute. And so, as I said previously, I like to put horseradish on the leaf. I do not like to leaf it alone. I like to put them right together. And I eat it on the sandwich. Now, when I eat the maror originally, I do not usually put horseradish on it. I might dip my finger and get a little taste. But I typically don't have it with, I usually don't use the two for maror. I'll usually just use it for the sandwich and save that till the end. It actually tastes pretty good, especially if you have Sephardic matzah, which is the floppy kind, like a pita. It's really good. All right. Now, this is not so much concerning measurements, but it does have to do with quantity. Now, what are we talking about? We're going to be talking about the charoset, which the charoset, remember, that is the mortar. That's the mortar with which we were putting our bricks together, right? We have a brick, we have the mortar right in the middle. That's how we build things. So we're going to be taking our bitter herb. Remember, we're taking our maror. Excuse me. We're taking our maror and we're dipping it. Let's here. We used this one originally, so we're going to be using the very different one. This F3. We're going to be taking our maror and we're going to be dipping it now into the charoset. But what are we going to do after that? Now we have all this tasty charoset all over our bitter herbs. We don't want it to be too tasty. So what we're going to do is that we're going to be like Taylor Swift and we're just going to shake it off, right? We're just going to shake off all the tasty chazeres and leave it for later. And we will be doing something with it later. Now, when we get to korech, which is the sandwich, remember, we take the two matzahs, and there, we have our bottom matzah. We take our two matzahs, our pieces of matzah, and we make that famous Hillel sandwich. And what are we going to do? Well, there's a mix of opinions on what to do. That's what we're going to do. So, for Ashkenazim, some do not eat it with the korech. And remember, we're talking about that tasty, appley, sweet mortar. Usually it's appley, anyway. That fruity mortar, let's say that. That fruity mortar we're not going to be putting on the korech. At least some won't. Now, others will be. In fact, it's quite common to do that. Most will actually be eating it with their Hillel sandwich. Now, among Sephardim, it is pretty universal to be eating the charosas with the korech. That is, it's common to eat that mortar with your Hillel sandwich. For Ashkenazim, again, they have their sources to rely on. They have the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, they have the Mishnah Berurah, and for Sephardim, you have the Ramah, the Beit Yosef, and in the Beit Yosef, that can be found in Kaf HaChaim. However, like I said, the general custom is to eat that mortar with your Hillel sandwich. And this is according to the Aruch HaShulchan and Mishnah Berurah. Now, something interesting that I learned this cycle around is that the Belzer Hasidim, we know that there's Chabad Hasidim, Breslever Hasidim, Ger Hasidim, Satmar Hasidim. I think that there's Clevelander Hasidim. There are Belzer Hasidim. Now, what do these Belzer Hasidim do? Well, they take their charosas and they have it as part of their meal for the next day. That is the daytime of the Yom Tov. So you have your Seder at night. You wake up, happy because it's Pesach, of course, obviously. And when you get up, when you have your meal, we're eating this charosas, all this leftover charosas during the meal. And I thought, you know what? I think a lot of people like to do that anyway. And I think that's a nice custom. And maybe I'll do that this year. I don't know. But I thought that I would throw that out there for you guys, in part because if you're doing that already, now you can say, I'm doing this for you, Belzer Hasidim. Well, you can do it for yourself as well. But um, now you know that you are not a weirdo. There's nothing wrong with being a weirdo, but it's even better not being one. For certain things, anyway. When it comes to eating charosas on the Yom Tov day, we know that we can be thinking of our Belzer brothers and sisters and thinking of them while we're eating our charosas with them. Whether we're Ashkenazi, whether we're Sephardi, it's just a nice thing. Now, as I mentioned previously, and as many of you will already know, we drink 4 cups of wine, at least, or grape juice, during the Seder. Now, how much do we actually have to drink per one of the 4 cups of wine? Is it a lick? Like, are we like a frog? We just go through and we just get a little taste? Do we have to drink an entire bottle? How much are we talking about? Well, I'm glad I asked yet again. How much we're talking about is very technical in the Talmud. It's very confusing. It is called a cheekful. Whatever you can fit in your cheek, that is how much. Usually what this comes out to is about, like I said, it's a revius. It is going to be 3 ounces. The Chazon Ish says 5, but 3 is the generally accepted custom among all Jews. Again, there are pockets of people who are a little bit stricter, and that's okay. There are people who do the 3 ounces. Not only is that okay, but that's basically what everybody does. All right, now for show and tell. Possibly. Yes, it is show and tell time. We will be taking our incredibly tasty, not stale at all, Yehuda matzahs. I really hope this box does not fall off my desk. That would be sad. All right, so here is our tasty matzah. Oh, no, I can't. All right, we have to finish the video. Here is our tasty matzah. And the question that we were asking is, how much of this delicious, delicious, not dry at all matzah do we have to eat? Or do we get to eat? Because it's not every day that we get to eat matzah. I'm realizing as I'm waving this around that there's this matzah right here. For a split second, I was thinking it was real for some reason. Even though, like all matzah that we find in the wild, it has writing on it. So, for hamotzi and for achilas matzah, so for the mitzvah of eating matzah, this is where remembering our, let's see, would it be 3rd grade, 4th grade math? I don't know. Do they even learn math anymore? So what we're going to be doing, I think that we're going to need, I think that we'll have enough matzah for all these. All right, so according to the Rambam, good old friend Rabbi Moshe Maimonides, he says that when it comes to alachilas matzah and for hamotzi, we can get away with, is that a 3rd? I think that's a 3rd. Yeah. Yeah, that blends in really well, doesn't it? So according to the Rambam, we can get away with 1/3 of a machine-made matzah. Now, of course, during the time of the Rambam, Yehuda matzah, I'm not trying to say that they weren't very productive, but by no fault of their own, they just simply didn't exist 800 years ago. And so they weren't making these beautifully tasty matzahs. So the Rambam was not talking about these specific matzahs. He was giving actually precise measurements. These measurements have been translated into, again, fluid ounces. So we're taking this amount of matzah and we're crumbling it up. We're crumpling up the matzah, not getting it on the keyboard, and we're crumpling it up as much as we possibly can, and we're seeing how much of the measuring cup doesn't fill up. I am obsessed about not having things between my fingers, so this is going to be great. And when it came to how much it filled up, it met the Rambam's requirements for having a kazayas of matzah. Now remember, I crumbled. I got some on the keyboard. Oh well. So remember, according to the Rambam, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of a matzah, according to the Rambam. All right. Now, on to contestant number 2. According to Tosafos, kind of. This is Rabbi Chaim Nea's interpretation of what Tosafos said. Now, according to him, according to Tosafos, he said that it is sufficient to eat 1/2 of a matzah. I am very sorry. That is about 60-40%. That's about half a matzah. So if you're going by 1/2, instead of doing the baby half and the big half, what we would probably do in this case is that we would go and be a little bit stricter than we need to and eat this larger half of the matzah. All right. So on to contestant number 3. I kind of do want some matzah now. On to contestant number 3. So this is according to the Chazon Ish. Now the Chazon Ish was also reading Tosafos just like Rabbi Chaim Ne'eh, and he came away with a different understanding. He said that according to Tosafos, they were actually talking about 3/4 of a. It comes out to what is 3/4 of a matzah, and he said, presumably, that Rabbi Chaim Ne'eh was on the right track, but a little bit off. So let's see if I can actually break this into 3/4. I washed my hands so that I could eat this matzah afterwards, so I can't scratch my itchy nose unless it's with my sleeve. The joys of mustache hairs going up the nose. All right, so we want to see what Chazon Ish has to say. He says 3/4 of a matzah. So that's about, this piece is a little bit big. We broke off a little bit too much in here, but that's okay, because even if we are going according to 3/4 interpretation, even if it's slightly smaller than what we intended, that's okay, because we still have the other interpretation of Tosafos to rely upon. That is, remember, the half. Now, when we are eating our korech, remember that is the Hillel sandwich. What we are going to do, we're going to take another whole matzah, and we're going to cut this guy right in half, hopefully. I feel like it was breaking somewhere where it's not half. Right. Let's move this back over the keyboard so I only crumb up half of it. There we go. Minimal crumbs. All right. I really should just move my computer, shouldn't I? That's what a smart person would do. So, here is our half. Once again, we want to use the slightly bigger piece because why the matzah not? That's what I want to know. Why the matzah not? The reason being is because we can. Because we're free. Because we're free to eat all the matzah that we want. So here is our 1/2 piece of matzah. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to take this guy right here. And we're going to break it in half once again, but we're going to eat both pieces. So here's our original matzah. Remember, we broke it in half. Here is our half that we're going to be using. And we broke it in half again so that we can make a delectable Hillel sandwich with these. Very tasty. I almost said testy. The reason being is because I was also thinking of Gordon Ramsay. He would be so proud of these matzah sandwiches, these Hillel sandwiches that we're all going to be making beautifully. So delicious. The tasty matzah sandwich that we're going to be putting our, right, remember, our maror, our bitter herbs, and that's going to be our lettuce, and for those who want it, the horseradish. We're going to put that between both pieces of the matzah, and we're going to take a big old bite of it. And while I haven't gotten into this for any of the other ingredients, the other elements, uh, when we are eating these, we want to eat them relatively quickly. We don't want to be talking in between. Um, eat it. Focus on doing the mitzvah. Focus on enjoying the taste, the texture, the feelings that it's espousing in us, and to really focus on the mitzvah. And so we don't want to be talking or joking around while we're eating. And we can joke around a little bit during the Seder, but um, while we're actually eating things, we want to focus on these and let them really impact our hearts and impact our minds. Now, that half that we're going to be using for the korech, remember that is the sandwich, um, we are allowed to use 1/3 if our tummies are starting to get full. So if you feel like your shirt's getting tight, your pants are getting tight, and you're like, I could definitely do 1/3 of the matzah, but half is too much, then we are welcome to do 1/3 according to the lenient opinion. So I know sometimes people with bigger bellies might have a problem. People with smaller ones might find this a little challenging. You know, this isn't a contest, but sometimes it might feel like that. All right, we're almost done. Now, when it comes to the afikomen, we are going to be eating. Let's see. Okay. When it comes to the afikomen, I'm trying to interpret my own writing, and it can be very difficult sometimes, especially if it's handwritten, which this is not. It's on my crummy computer. So when we're eating the afikomen, we're going to be eating 3/4 of the afikomen. This is according to Rashi. Now, other opinions allow 1/2. So if 3/4 is a little bit too much, your tummy can only eat half. Half will definitely do. And if you have got a small stomach, or if you're just starting to get full, we are allowed to eat 1/3 of the machine-made matzah. And I think at this point, we have a whole plate of crumpled up matzahs. I don't think that we need any more demonstrations. I'll have to eat all this over Shabbat. So actually, I have to eat it over Shabbat. This year, for Pesach, Pesach begins on Shabbos. So I guess I will be eating it on Shabbos. Bli neder. So to clean up my keyboard here, clean off my hands, to decrumb my hands. Okay, so two last things. These don't really pertain to the ingredients of the Seder, but they are nonetheless very important. At the end of the Seder, next year in Jerusalem, then the first night of the Seder, for those of you who are outside the land of Israel, we are going to be singing. Me, 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 me. All right, get your singing voice on. Get in the festive Pesach joyous singing mood. No matter how badly we sing, it all sounds beautiful to Hashem, so don't worry about that. We don't need to sing loudly, but we do need to not necessarily sing. But it's for our enjoyment. It's to make everything a little bit more festive. So get your singing voice on, and your thinking cap, but also your singing voice. And the first night in the Golas, in the diaspora, outside of the land of Israel, we are going to be singing a song called ECHAD YODEA. And some of you, again, might be familiar with the song. It goes, ECHAD YODEA, ECHAD YODEA, ECHAD Eloheinu, 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 Shem b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Dun, 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 dun. Then it goes to 2, and it goes to 3, it goes to 4. Now, for those of you who know Hebrew, you know that echad means a kazayas. It means one. It means 1 fluid ounce, remember? Like a kazayas. It means 1. So when we're counting, testing, 1, 2, 3, echad times shalosh, this is how we count in Hebrew. And this song is in Hebrew. And it's asking, 1? Who knows 1? I know 1. There's 1 God in heaven. Then it goes to 2. It goes to 3. Like the 3 fluid ounces of a revius, remember? Who knows 3? I know 3. 3 is how much a revius is. A revius. That's not actually the song, by the way. So it goes 1 through 12. And this is a very important, very traditional Pesach song. And it's actually quite fun. I remember when we were teaching the kids these songs, this was their favorite one. In part because the next one's a little bit trickier. It's called GADYA. And it's a song, it's actually quite spiritual. It's quite esoteric in a sense. But really we mean spiritual because it's very metaphorical. Maybe that would be a better word. Because the central character of this song is a little goat. And the initial lyric goes, my father bought a goat for 2 zuzim. Zuzim are little coins. So it's like saying, my father bought a goat for 50 cents. Or for $5, a very small amount. And it goes through this whole list of animals and processes and people, and eventually, it comes down to the cow, which was slaughtered by the shaychet, which was killed by the angel of death, which was destroyed by Hashem, and it's actually a really cool song. I really like it. I really enjoy it. For those of you who want, we can find these tunes on our good old friend YouTube. The algorithm will help you. It might not help me, but it will help you find these songs. And speaking of the algorithm, if you want to help the algorithm, help get these videos out more, make sure to comment down below and leave us a like. Even subscribe. That would be a true... Remember what month it is? It is Nisan, the month of Nisim. So if you want to do some true Nisim, consider hitting subscribe, hitting the bell. If you feel like it, if that's something that you're into. So, if you're looking for the tunes and the lyrics to these songs, you can find them anywhere online. You can find them anywhere on YouTube. It's quite common. You'll even find different renditions of these songs. They're very popular songs, and for good reason. They're actually quite catchy. So, that is the end of our video, but not quite. It's a mitzvah to honor our parents, but I will call my dad back after the video. He might be calling again after this, so let's finish this up real quick. All right, so we do have some reminders. I was going to say, I hope I didn't poke you in the eye there. But we do have some reminders. All right, so before we finish the video, I know we've gone on for almost an hour. The algorithm does not like videos that are an hour. I'm sorry. But I don't tend to like videos longer than an hour either. I mean, in all fairness. But we do have some reminders. Okay, so first of all, this is a holiday. It is a Yom Tov, so we do want to remember that we are lighting Yom Tov candles for the holiday. We want to do that right before Shabbat, because this year, again, this is for 2022, 5782 in the Jewish year. This year, Pesach begins also on Shabbos, and so we're going to be lighting holiday candles before Shabbos candles. The reason being is because once we light Shabbos candles, that's the start of Shabbat, and after Shabbat, we don't light any candles. We don't light any flames, remember? So we will light the holiday candles and then Shabbat candles. Also, because the holiday is like a Shabbat, and also this year it actually happens to be Siamese twins with Shabbat. It is falling on the exact same day as Shabbat. We will be doing Kiddush for two reasons. Those two reasons. Now the next day after Shabbat, for the second day of Yom Tov, we will also be doing Kiddush for that day as well. Another reminder, this was always something that was, for whatever reason, very tricky for me to figure out and to remember. But we will be demystifying it all right here on Tzaddik Media. So remember. We begin counting the OMER. That is counting up until Shavuos, that is Shavuot, as Christians call it, Pentecost. So we will be counting down, actually counting up the days. Who knows one? I know one. It's the first day of the OMER. So we'll be counting the first day of the OMER, the second night of Pesach. So the first Seder that we do, you better not count. I know we love Sesame Street, but the Count is not invited to this one. I'm sorry, Count. But you can come to the second night of Seder, right? The hobbits had second breakfast, we have second Seder. I think that's kind of a win-win, or even a better deal than second breakfast. The Count can come to second Seder, right? There's 1 ounce to a kazayas. There's the second night of Seder, and there's 3 fluid ounces of a revius, right? You're going to remember this. We're going to make it happen. You do well on the test, and I'm not offering a test, but you better do well on it. So the second night of the Seder. Remember, we have 2 outside of Israel. We have 2. Inside Israel, we just do 1. Outside of Israel, we do 2. So for the second night, we are beginning to count the OMER. What is counting the OMER? It is saying today is 1 day of the counting of the OMER. Today is 2 days counting the OMER, and so on. Now, for those of you who need, if you would like the precise words, again, you can find this online. You can also find this in your Machzor. And actually, if I remember correctly, I think that the Pesach Machzor will also have the counting of the OMER in it. And I didn't prepare this beforehand. Let's see. Just go into the table of contents would help. All right, let's see. It does on page 556. Let's turn there real quick. Now, I know for at least my Haggadah, it does include the counting of the OMER in it. And I think that some of you will also have Haggadot that have the same. Let's see again if I can find this real quick. Here we have GADYA. Where is the counting of the OMER? Sefer OMER, here we go. Okay. Now, we're not actually counting the OMER, so we're not going to go through all this. But at least in this Haggadah, we say this short little meditation saying, you know, I'm getting myself ready to count the OMER, and I'm really going to focus on this mitzvah, and I'm really going to try to connect with it. It feels like a very small or very short, very concise mitzvah, but it is a mitzvah nonetheless. And we're taught that we never really know the weight of any mitzvah. This seems small, but maybe it's worth a lot of heaven points. I hate to say heaven points, but maybe it's worth a whole lot more to Hashem than it does to us. That's all that I'm saying. So this particular Haggadah, it's an excellent Haggadah. I have to say it's my favorite one. It is the Breslov Haggadah with the famous crumbs on it. My matzah balls gebrox. That is a pun because in Yiddish, gebrox means broken. It's also the word that we give to matzah balls and other certain things. Okay, so what I was going to say is that I always get, I don't know if I'd say compliments, but comments on the big chunk of matzah that is on the cover. Everybody seems to love that. And on the back as well. So in terms of content, though, this really is the best Haggadah that I've ever seen, and it's not my only one. Let's get our original matzo ball back onto the scene to help us finish out the video. All right, so you might have the text for Sefer OMER in your Haggadah, or it might also be in your Passover Machzor. This is what one version of the Machzor looks like. This particular one that I use is Nusach Sephard. There is also Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sepharad, which is a little bit different than Sephard. Okay, so like I said, the counting of the OMER is on the second night of the Seder, the second night of Passover, the Pesach. All right, now I can't show you the app because I'm filming on my phone. However, this is the best app. I feel like Donald Trump. It's the best app. All my friends love it. They say it's the best app. This app has the largest hands. So what this app is called is Counting the OMER. OMER. Counting the OMER. And I highly recommend that you install this app on your phone. What it does is that it sends you notifications and says, hey, you haven't counted the OMER yet. I think that you should do that. And so it reminds us to count the OMER. Not only this, but it also has pretty neato lessons about the OMER. And usually it has various pieces of content relating to that particular day of the OMER. And as some of you will know, again, that each day of the OMER we learn a little something new. So it's a particular lesson that goes with a particular day of the OMER. Not everybody does it, but there are those who choose to do that. And I think that that is a good thing to adopt. Airplane mode would also be a good thing to adopt, wouldn't it? We are almost done. All right. So one last reminder. For those of you who run businesses or who are expecting calls, if your family you think is going to call you during the holidays. And if you do not plan on using your phones, then you might want to change your voicemails. I remember, I think it was the first 2 or 3 years that I was out on my own in the wild world. I didn't change my number. And people tried calling me, and I didn't pick up. And they said, "Why are you not picking up?" But I couldn't respond to why I was not picking up, because I wasn't picking up to get their call. So when I found out that they had left me voicemails, that they had texted me, they said, "Oh my gosh, are you dead?" I said, "I sure hope not." And I texted them back. I said, "Sorry, I've been away from my phone. It's been Passover. We don't use our phones on Shabbat or Yom Tov." And I said for the holidays, and you could save yourself a lot of splaining. So change your voicemail. Say, "I can't get to the phone right now. Call back after Pesach." And people will be like, "What's a Pesach?" And you can say, "This is a Pesach. This is a Pesach. That's 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 a more." All right. Let me wipe off all these crumbs from my keyboard now and from my desk. I think that I have some splitting to do. All right. For those of you who want, there are Pesach Seder demonstrations on YouTube. I am going to try to put links to these in the description below. So go down there, watch these demos. They are not demonstrations from me. They are actually demos that I have found that have been helpful for what... See, there's a difference when you're attending somebody's Seder versus hosting your own Seder. It's like, attending somebody's Thanksgiving versus hosting Thanksgiving. Like, it's a big deal. And there are many other things to do. And it's a different dynamic. So these things will help. In part because you can pause, you can comment and talk with people. So even if you've grown up with Pesach Seders your entire life, these videos can be helpful when you're hosting your own. So I will leave you with that. I have two that I have found that I thought were pretty good. There's also some Passover recipes that I will try to link below. There's also this pretty cool coloring book, GADYA. It's basically a Haggadah for kids, but it's a coloring book. So while we won't be coloring on the Yom Tov or on Shabbat, give them something to do before the holiday. Let there be some build-up. Let there be some anxious tension. Let them really be, looking forward to the holiday. So, as always, for all of these videos, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, along with A Treasury of Sephardic Laws and Customs by Rabbi Herbert Dobrinsky, in addition to the Kosher Kitchen and these, let's see, there we go, these purple books right here. These are the Purple Pesach books. These are fantastic books. That's the Kosher Kitchen. That's the Sephardic Treasury. And thank you to the Matzo Ball. Signing off, thank you all for lasting this long with me. It's been a rough few days. I'm sick and tired and thinking about matzah. So, alrighty, you guys take care. Thank you, my favorite Hasidim and Tzaddikim. I trust that we will all have a happy and kosher Pesach and Chag Sameach.